Hello, I'm Patricia Gras. Welcome to Passion Time. I'm here with Misa Nguyen. She is with United Against Human Trafficking. And as many of you know, Houston is a hub. Unfortunately, we're number one for something that we don't want to be really known for, and that is human trafficking. So welcome to Passion Time. But before we start, I want to know, what is your passion and how you found your passion?
My passion is human trafficking and really the eradication of such a crime. I found this passion when I was a student at the University of Texas at Austin, and I never imagined that a crime like this of such a severe nature can happen to people today in our time. So after I graduated, I went to nonprofit and eventually found myself with an opportunity to be in a place where I could use my voice to educate others about this severe crime.
I understand there's about 800,000 people, almost 1 million people being trafficked every year in the world.
Actually, it's roughly about 21 million people is the estimate.
So that is a very low, okay, 21
20.9 is the actual estimate from the International Labor Organization.
It's like a whole country being trafficked.
It's enormous. And out of that 21 million estimate, there's about 1.5 million estimated to be in developed economies such as the United States. So even though that's not as much as opposed to the greater whole, one is really still too many people to be involved in this situation.
Explain to me why Houston is such a hub for trafficking, and who are the people being trafficked and where are they coming from to Houston?
Absolutely. Well, we'll start with the first part of the question. Houston has long had a reputation for being a hub of human trafficking among many other cities in the United States, including El Paso out of Texas, due to a couple factors. One being our location, our U.S.-Mexico border, our presence, so close to that international border, our transportation networks that allow traffickers to easily access our city and move in and out, our diverse population, so allows traffickers to bring victims in from different places and not have them be, recognized or seem, out of the ordinary to the citizens here in the city, as well as our diversity of industry. So you have different opportunities where people can be exploited for their labor or through commercial sex acts, in other words, forced into acts of prostitution. So you have men, women, and children who could be forced to provide these commercial sex acts, forced into the prostitution, in other words, or forced to provide some kind of labor or service against their will.
Where are they coming from, most of them? Do we know?
We have an idea that there are individuals who come across the U.S.-Mexico border, but really victims can come from anywhere. They could be people who are from foreign countries. We refer to them as foreign nationals who are trafficked within the United States. But we also have U.S. citizens. So those who are born right here in the United States or have become legal permanent residents.
Mm-hmm. Well, do we know, you said America, I didn't know that Americans are being trafficked within America. I had no idea. But what about most people coming from Asia, from Latin America, from Eastern Europe? I mean, what do we know more or less, or we don't?
We don't really at this time, yes.
Okay, the most important thing here is, what can people do if they suspect anything, and what should they be looking for?
Absolutely.
To help, stem this flow of human trafficking?
Human trafficking is such a complex crime. And so we highly encourage anyone to start learning more about it. Start learning about how it looks in terms of sex trafficking and how it looks in terms of labor trafficking. With sex trafficking, it's very easy or I shouldn't say very easy, but it's easier than, say, labor trafficking to identify because we can look for situations that look like prostitution. So a lot of our law enforcement task force, like the Houston Police Department, has a specialized unit within their Vice Department, which concentrates on sex crimes, but also those of human trafficking. So it's easy for us in a way to more readily identify that than, say, a labor trafficking situation, because with labor trafficking, any situation where you can force someone to work in some form or fashion, whether it's as a teacher, as a nurse, or as a janitor, or a nanny in a home, all of these situations and have been situations of human trafficking right here in the United States. Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, to get educated about what human trafficking is and begin to look for signs of control. These, again, are not very easy signs to look for, but we believe it helps if you start within a community that you know, maybe the community that you reside in. So you go to a coffee shop, you go to a convenience store, you go to a grocery store regularly. Talk to the people who work there. Do they seem like they have a lack of freedom? They have a lack of ability to control how and when they can move? Are they wearing the same clothing every day? Do they seem to have, an inability to maintain their own hygiene? These are just some factors that can be looked for, but it really comes into play with that observance and conversation. How when they visit their family, who controls their wages? Do they get paid directly? So all the things that you could look for, say, in a labor exploitive situation overall, such as wage theft, you can also apply to situations like human trafficking. And so once you have an idea or sense that you observe that someone is being controlled by someone else and being forced to work in some form or fashion or forced into prostitution, then you can call the hotline. There's a national hotline. It's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A very, very easy number to remember. We always kind of instruct people, it's 888, so 888-3737. 888.
Oh, okay.
So you just have to remember.
And it's on the screen right now. But let me ask you this. Do we know how many people in Houston, for example, are traffic victims? Any idea?
Unfortunately,
10,
we don't
000?
have an idea. No.
Whatsoever.
The numbers we do have are based off of our local service providers like the YMCA International, Catholic Charities, Freedom Place. These are just some of the many agencies that serve different types and aspects and populations of victims of human trafficking. And so in the past couple of years, for example, the YMCA has served over 500 individuals in their services.
Let's talk about that. Once we discover, let's say we found traffic victims, how do you help them?
That is a great question. One, first and foremost, is to plug into our local service providers. They have various needs. A lot of them aren't necessarily able to kind of put out blanket calls for, whatever it is that they need, but they could at times call for very specific supplies. So when they have a victim who is being placed in some kind of housing situation, or a survivor even, so someone who's, has some distance behind them from their trafficking exploitive situation, they can request, bed sheets, cookware, furniture, things like that. But again, these are very specific needs. Other ways the agencies could use help from the public is to first get educated, to become more aware. And a lot of it, I believe, drives to funding, to be honest. I know that's something, we hear often about in the nonprofit world, but the fact of the matter is caring for a victim of human trafficking requires so many different services that it's not all applicable, in a very easy system.
If found out, they would never be deported, though, even though they came here illegally.
So if someone has been in a trafficking situation and came to this country as an undocumented immigrant or undocumented individual, forced immigrant, so to speak, they actually have rights and protection under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the federal law.
Tell me so if people see something, there's something they can do, but what are some of the things that you keep saying you need to get educated, besides what you said? What do you suggest people do? I mean, I don't think most people in Houston realize that there's a human trafficking problem here in Houston. It's not really big news here.
Absolutely. Well, you just hit the nail on the head with what you just said. I mean, that's why our agency, United Against Human Trafficking, exists, because we have seen this problem since for over a decade now. We've existed for 10 years. And started with the purpose of really trying to get information about this crime. And we have seen change over the past decade. More and more people nowadays recognize the term of human trafficking or have heard about human trafficking, but don't know how to define it. And so if we can't even define it, having people be able to say that it's men, women, and children who are forced to work or forced to, into sex trafficking against their will, how can we even begin to identify and solve it?
So that people can get an idea of what we're talking about.
Absolutely. We have a wonderful law enforcement task force that our agency is a part of. It's called the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance. It's a law enforcement collaborative between local, state, and federal law enforcement agents and our social service providers I mentioned earlier. One of the cases that they worked recently in the past year was of a Nigerian nanny. There was a Nigerian couple that resided in Katy, in a suburb, affluent suburb of Houston, and they brought this woman over, promising her a job, promising her that they would pay her, and all she had to do was take care of their children. And they promised her that they would also help her address her medical needs that she had. All that turned out to be true was that she cared for their children, and she cared for them for many, many hours, from before 5:30 a.m. in the morning to 1 a.m. at night. Was forced to sleep and live in horrible conditions, not necessarily furnished with a space to sleep like the rest of the family. One of the abuses that came out at trial was the fact that she wasn't allowed necessities such as milk, fresh milk, for her tea. She had to strain her milk from the leftover cereal and milk that the children had eaten that morning in order to, fulfill that need. Many neighbors had observed her because she would be only allowed to walk the children in the neighborhood within a block or 2-block radius of the couple's home, but that was it. But the fact of the matter is that even people who lived very close to this couple that trafficked this woman had no idea what was happening. They just thought that she was disheveled, that she had issues, and they actually thought she was a lot older than she actually was. But all this to say is that sometimes trafficking is happening right in front of us, and it can be still very difficult to discern.
Now, was that woman, did someone help her, or did she say something?
Yes, so she was able to escape her situation and flee to a neighbor's house, asked the neighbor for help, and the neighbor called the national hotline.
Okay.
And so that's why we really recommend the national hotline as a resource for both victims of human trafficking and community members. You could call to report a tip, but you can also call for information. Say you have a question about human trafficking, you can call them and ask that question.
All right, Misa Nguyen, thank you so much. United Against Human Trafficking. Appreciate you being here, and hopefully you pay attention and you call that number if you see anything strange going on, because we are all responsible for this. We can all do something about it. Thank you for watching Passion Time, and make sure you subscribe to our channel. See you next time.